Hello and welcome. I'm streaming to you live from a really cool ISO booth. It's nice and quiet in here. And it's been a while since I've done an actual live stream. I've been doing a lot of the pre recorded podcasts recently. But I went down to write an email for my thoughts and the energetic update for 2024. And I realized that this wanted to come through as a video. So here we go. Welcome back to the Octave Leap podcast. No production on this one. This is a last minute decision to come at you with a video transmission of what my email newsletters would normally cover. Now, I should say the best way to get the goods from me is email newsletters. So if you're not on the newsletter, please click the link below, sign yourself up. That's where the goods come. That's the best way to keep informed about what I do. I am not the best on social media, but I like emails. Okay, so let's dive in. Basically, I've had an uncanny ability, both intuitively and also in the way that my rational calculation mind works, able to take a number of complicated things that seem disparate or seem sort of unrelated, but they all kind of weave together. And therefore, I've been pretty good at being able to pick up on things before they happen. I wouldn't say a prediction, but more of a bridge between a logical, or a coherent, I should say, because it's the bridge between the logical and the intuitive sort of forecast for what I see happening in the future. And the beginning was whenever, I'll paraphrase this by saying, when everybody was freaking out in 2020 and they thought the world was going to end at the end of the year, I said, well, no, the world's not ending. We've got probably another decade of transformation. And I also said that it will come in several phases, which has also been true. So far, this mechanism that I have has been, I wouldn't say accurate in being able to pinpoint things, but the strokes of it, the direction has been spot on. And back in 2019, I remember watching a particular transmission. And in that transmission, I really kind of tuned in. And what he was saying that really stuck with me, like it's one of those moments where you pay attention, was that 2020 and 2024 are two very important flashpoint years in our near future. And in many ways, 2020 turned out to be that, and 2024 is to be determined. However, if you could feel it in 2023, the energies were intensifying, much like they were back in 2019. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have some sort of a global disaster or something like that, but we're definitely going to see a progression towards the larger global transmutation that's happening. And I'll also say, too, that in many ways, the tide has already turned for the better. That doesn't mean that there won't be challenges that lie ahead, but the tide has turned in favor of those who wish to see a heart-based future emerge sooner rather than centuries later. And what this means is that it was up in the air for a little while, whether that we were going to be subjected to a control-based future, especially over the previous decade. There was genuine concern about that. But somehow the shift was made, I'd say, between 2020 and 2022. And then the last year kind of really affirmed that and accelerated that. And what I mean by this specifically is that particular agendas and suggestions that are being made on the larger scale, they don't have the same weight and follow through as they once did. So they're not working as effectively. That doesn't mean that they're not able to actualize something. It simply means that they can't address their prime directives. And so all they can do is attempt to delay things or to harvest a little bit more fear and anger from the general populace and potentially cause a little bit of actual chaos in the process. But what we saw in 2023, and this has been a trend over the last 40, 50 years, is that the appetite for war and destruction are probably at an all-time low globally. And despite, we are seeing a little bit of polarization with taking sides, but it's even becoming less pronounced now. The bigger call to action we're seeing is that people are saying, we don't want any more war, we don't want any more conflict. And the majority of people are not placing blame. That was not true in the past, where it was very much an us versus thing. Let's support the military industrial complex. So war is not able to gain the same amount of ground. The one thing we have to realize too is that many of the things we see in the media or we see coming out of politicians' mouths are suggestions of a potential future, and that what's important for us to do is not give those things energy by projecting fear, anger, or outrage at them. Instead, let them just kind of slide by, and so they don't get watered. If you know, who was it? Dr. Was it Masaro Oto? Yeah, Masaro Oto. He showed that if you have 3 cups of rice, and one rice you say positive things to, the rice will flourish. If you say negative things to, the rice kind of deteriorates. But if you ignore the third one, it really, really deteriorates fast. So the same thing works with suggestions. That if you take a suggestion and you give any energy to it, it feeds it. If you don't give anything to it, it starves it. So the important thing to remember moving into 2024 is to avoid polarization, to avoid reactivity, because what's happening now is something that has lost control. The tides have already turned. Something that once had power, and I'm talking about the decaying institutions rooted in fear, that once were the power brokers of this world, at least of the material world, they don't have the same relevance anymore. It's almost like they're trying to buy things with a currency that is getting devalued and will eventually be obsolete. It's like, who cares if you have 1 billion Prussian francs? That currency isn't accepted anywhere. So if you're peddling the currency of war, if you're peddling the currency of fear and division, you have to put in a lot more effort to get far less results out of it. I'm not saying it isn't working, but it's working far less effectively, to the point where it would be very hard for a large-scale makeover to happen, and the amount of energy required for that would be too great for that to actually come to materialization. Now, what they can possibly hope for is creating some sort of flashpoint event to harvest energy in the form of fear, anger, and outrage from people. And my guess would be looking at the astrological plays, and the astrological plays of 2024 are quite significant, as was 2020 when we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn. But moving ahead in this year, especially around May, we're going to have a Taurus-Uranus conjunction. Sorry, Uranus-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. Uranus is technology, Taurus is stability, Jupiter is expansion. So there is a possibility of something involving a breakaway or a breakthrough in technology around that time that creates some degree of disruption. I don't want to be planting fear in people's minds, because honestly, if you're on the right frequency, you'll get through it. You'll be in the right place at the right time. The right people will be there to support you. And you're essentially not plugged into, and you're not being fed by the fear machine anymore anyway. So just distance yourself emotionally and mentally from whatever might come. And yes, there might be some sort of physical implementation. Let's say if there's a cyber attack and the power goes out in your area, that narrative has been projected into people's awareness. There's a movie that came out recently with Sandra Bullock. Was it Sandra Bullock or was it Julia Roberts? I think it was maybe Julia Roberts, actually. I can't remember. But anyway, it was about a cyber attack in the United States of America, and it was a 2023 movie. Ethan Hawke was in it as well. And I can't remember the name of it, but it was just basically like a cyber attack with chaos. And you can see the predictive programming in there. Not only that, but the papers in Austria and Germany a few years ago were preparing people for an eventual energy blackout. So some sort of a disruption to the energy grid has already been implanted in people's minds. So as long as we're not watering that collectively too much, don't worry about it. It's a suggestion. Doesn't mean nothing will happen, but don't get too afraid about it. That is a possibility, especially with those type of energies. And I wouldn't be surprised with the development of AI that something happens and AI is to blame, or something happens and it's passed on as some sort of a rogue AI type of thing, or used by terrorists, that type of thing. That is also a possibility. I mean, I don't want to get too much into what ifs, but I'm just saying that the energies around May, April, June really speak towards something potentially happening with the expansion of technology. Not only that, but shortly after that, Jupiter actually ingresses into the sign of Gemini, which is very much a fast-moving air sign, very much involved with technology. So that is another period of time in which we could see some sort of a technological disruption, mental disruption as well. So the primary energy around that time is something that has to do with a disruptive technology or distracting news. So some big nothing burger in the news that everybody gets worked up about. That is also possible around that time of year. Now, the big thing in that I'm looking towards is the end of the year, when there's an ingress of Pluto into the sign of Aquarius. Now, Pluto's sort of been dancing between Capricorn and Aquarius, the end of Capricorn and Aquarius, and kind of going back. By November, it firmly sits in the sign of Aquarius, and that shift will be a move into when Pluto begins to redefine a new way of being, a new political system. And the energy of Aquarius kind of has two sides to it. It has the technological Borg, the Borg, like in Star Trek, like the hive mind, everyone is yes, it has that. And then we've already seen those themes playing out, which is also why at this point in time, there's so much around AI, and there's so much around conformity, and there's so much around mass conformity, especially. And on the other side is Aquarius is a very humanitarian sign. It's like the universal brotherhood and sisterhood. And so it's very compassionate, and it's very much about taking care of others, taking care to make sure that all needs are met by everyone. So that's the higher frequency setting of it. And so what we want to make sure is that we're meeting that higher frequency side of it, because one of the themes that could be very prevalent this year has to deal with the financial system. We know that the digital yuan in China is launching very soon. We know that there's a discussion for a digital euro, and there's also a digital dollar discussion. They've also piloted this in various countries like Nigeria, and that didn't go over very well, by the way. So central bank issued digital currencies are another theme that might be arising in the middle of this year. But if that were to flop, what we might end up seeing, and there could be some disruption, but we might end up seeing that the buy-in to the whole fiat money concept is dwindled. We've been hit with years of inflation now. The financial system should have collapsed, but it was propped up by AI. I saw that in the financial markets 2 years ago, quite distinctly. Because if the financial markets collapse, it creates such a chaotic state that can't even be channeled into anything productive for anyone. So in many ways, it isn't in the best interest to just kind of collapse the thing and see what happens. It's a very kind of chaotic situation. And the other thing too is that if people are already awake on a mass level, what ends up happening is that people form their own dual power, or they wield their own dual power, which allows them to exist in and out of the system, or they exist in their own communities and ecosystems beyond control of any sort of outside or external authority. So therefore, there's caution around that. And anyone that is waking up right now will see that anyone that is awake right now will see that there has been a lot of awareness shift happening in even the mass of humanity. Now, it's not necessarily happening on a spiritual level, but it's happening on a level of individuating properly. People are learning that they can do what they've always wanted to, follow their passion, stop being told what to do. Because essentially, when we do that and we give away our power and we act without sovereignty, that's how we've propped up an artificial system for many generations. What was the famous thing that the Nazi officers were saying after World War II when they were being investigated during the Nuremberg trials? It was, why did you do that? And it's like, well, we were just following orders. And so, atrocities and, terrible things can be done in the name of, I was just following orders. I was just, giving my power away, suppressing my sense of morality and values, and just going along with whatever I was being told to do. There's less of that now, and that's another reason why anybody that has an agenda to push has to push this hard to get this much out. And this is happening across the board. Even in more benign situations, anybody that says, hey, like, I've run a company and I want to retain workers, it's harder to get people to do things now because people are waking up to serving their own needs. They're waking up to living life by their own terms. And we're seeing this as basically in the younger generation, as the revolution that's happening with this whole internet digital lifestyle. I saw a lot of that living in Bali. I see a lot of that living here in South Africa. There's a lot of nomads, digital nomads, that come with a laptop that are young, that basically say, hey, I never went to university, or I dropped out of university because I found a way to make a living and to experience financial freedom online. And certainly that's part of my story too, although I started much later in life than a lot of these kids. And when you start doing that and you start living according to your own terms and you define your own schedule and you define your own scope of what you do with the day, you stop buying into a lot of the BS that we're told we have to do. Even seeing this in the old generation that's been quite bought in to the way that the world operates, even they're not buying it fully anymore. And politics is getting even less investment. I mean, yeah, I think there's a presidential election this year happening in the US, but like, from what I can see and feel and detect, it isn't done with the same weight that it has been in the past, because the relevancy of two-party systems or multiple party systems to provide, tangible solutions for people, the appetite for that is lower than ever. This is an all-time low. People don't know yet what to do, the mass majority of people. So out of fear, they might cling to these things, but there's also a pull in a new direction. And so, yes, this year, especially the middle to the end of this year, might see a little bit more upheaval. There might be some sort of event potentially, or not. That's the beautiful thing about the future, is the future isn't decided. It isn't written on stone. There are some outcomes that are more likely than others. However, doesn't mean they're going to happen. And so, how am I proceeding in 2024? Well, I've taken stock of the things that I really, really enjoy doing. And I've been watering a dream, my highest vision in a way. And so I ask myself, does this action that I want to take align with my vision or deter from it? Because at this point in time, the ruthless commitment that I'm making, and I say ruthless because I've been able to trick myself and veer off in the past, but now it's all about adhering to that larger vision. And when we know how to set a vision that doesn't pitch the tent halfway up the mountain, but goes right to the peak, that's a vision that we can stay devoted to. And that's a vision that will carry us through when the times get tough. It's a vision that will help us bend reality as needed so that we're dodging bullets if we find ourselves on a battlefield. Because ultimately, let's face it, we can't expect the Great Awakening to happen as a walk in the park. Maybe, 15 years ago, people felt it would be like that. It could be rosy. We'd be whisked away into some new age rapture, but that's not the case. And many people who were not, asleep had to wake up, and many people who were spiritual had to get sober because they were drunk on their own delusion juice. And they have to become more grounded, and they have to learn very practical, real world skills in order to function. And those that are highly energetically sensitive need to know how to set good energetic boundaries for themselves so that they can operate in this world. Yes, we're moving into a future that is more frequency driven and energy aware and sensitive, but getting there involves also dealing with the hangover effect of being subjected to institutions of fear for millennia. And as these institutions fall over and decay and collapse, they're going to bring up a lot of collective shadow. And that comes in waves. We couldn't sustain 10 or 12 years of peak bulldozing. Also, too, I mean, the resources to prop up something like that, both energetically and financially, are immense. So it does come in waves. And there's a peak and a trough, and a peak and a trough. And you probably felt the trough sometime between 2022 and 2023 as things begin to ease and open up again. And I'm saying that there's a chance that there might be another peak event that then creates another wave. And this wave will not have the same response as before, because people are learning slowly. And it takes a lot to shake up those that are really invested in the illusion. But people are slowly waking up to the fact that they can do whatever they want and they're totally free, and there's no one to blame, and there's nothing to complain about, because life is surrounding us. It's abundant and beautiful, and that we can basically go and just live in accordance with that. And that somehow, we'll render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. We'll, make sure our bills are paid and all that. That'll be taken care of, but we can essentially just do what we want. Yes, we have one foot in the, you can't just be like, living in a house and not paying the rent or the mortgage, that type of thing, but that'll get taken care of for you. And your food supply will be taken care of for you when you live a life of trust, because you're tapped into what you're really here to do, your higher vision and serving your mission. And so that's, to me, the kind of no-brainer for 2024, is that now is the time to get really, really clear on what that is, because if anything were to happen during these particular potential flashpoints that I've outlined, that will not be a time to try to get clarity, because there'll be so much other turbulence happening. So it's better to be preemptively aware and to be prepared in advance. And it's not like, again, it's not this material prepper type of mentality. My idea of being prepared is being energetically certain of the direction that we're heading. And that's useful for any time, really. But sometimes we have the luxury of not having to prepare because there's nothing imminent in front of us, not having to make a choice, not having to be super clear. However, if change strikes at any minute, you want to be certain that you were prepared during those times. And preparation's fun. It's taking off the clothes of distraction. I've done so many trifecta readings, both in person and remote readings, and there's a reason why, I've uncovered this way of mapping out the core wound and shifting it at this time, because we've got to be direct. It's like the core wound is the chain reaction of all the other things that cause our healing crisis. Why not just go for that and shift it? Form the most direct path to it. And I'm having more and more conversations with people who are actually aware of that and ready to shift it. And there's a huge readiness in people right now to deal with that linchpin, that core weakness in their ability to just naturally have a seamless, fluid relationship with life. And when we deal with that, we're clear. And when we're clear, we can actually hook into our vision. When we hook into our vision, we can then bend reality to get the resources and people in alignment to do our part. And yes, we may be doing our part again in the backdrop of fallout and other transitional elements happening in the world. Yes, that's necessary. And it does require a bit of resilience and a bit of fortitude to witness what comes with the changing of the guard, the changing between epochs, So I invite us all to just take off the rose-colored glasses once again, the next layer of rose-colored glasses, and listen and be clear and smile and treat people compassionately and avoid getting too caught up in fear and anger. It happens a little bit, even to the best of us. But those emotions, if we allow them to be entrenched for long periods of time, it's not really good for our direction that we're heading, and it's certainly not good for our health. What's much better is optimism, inspiration, connection, unity, humor, jokes. These are the good things. These are the things that we should be investing our time and energy into. That goes for any point in time, but this right now, the times we're living in are the greatest reminder to drop the BS and to come back to who we are. The age we're heading to is an age of heart-centered individuation, where we serve our own individual passions and desires, and they naturally plug into the greater context of life. We're stepping out of the shadow of external control. We're stepping out of the shadow of giving our power away and handing things over, because that's what these collapsing institutions have relied on. And we're giving birth to an entire new species that operates out of heart-led passion. This isn't a quick process, certainly not easy, but here we are doing it one step at a time, one breath at a time, and for me, one podcast at a time. All right, I hope you enjoyed this 2021 or 2024, what am I saying? 2024 special transmission podcast. I wish you all well. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. And if you want to stay up to date on things, just please join the newsletter below. Take care.